I'm ready. Going live.
Hey y'all, I'm James Wright and welcome to the shop. Today, I've got Mark here with me.
Hello.
And we are going to be having some fun actually going through how do you flatten a board. And so I get to talk about things a lot, but it's always some of those things, I skip over things because they're just normal and I don't even think about them. But it's nice to have someone here who wants to learn the topic. And he can then stop me and say, hey, why are we doing that? And that'll allow you to have more information that I would normally skip over. And it's kind of one of those great things. So we do a live one-on-one like this once a month. And if you like this, let me know. If you have a particular topic or would like to be a part of this, let me know that as well. I do have a few people who I'm working with for future ones, but we can always look for more in the future. Upcoming topics. We are going to be doing a live build again. We try and do one every 6 months or so. And this time we're actually making a wooden router plane. It is going to be 2 weeks from this Saturday, which is, what is that, babe?
The 9th?
9th. Yeah, the 9th.
When we come back.
Yeah, after we get back. So we're going to be building a router plane from scratch. I will have the hardware list out hopefully next week. So if you want to build along with us, you can do that. And I'm planning on having a pattern as well that you can download. So just to let you people know, it's normally Saturday morning early, and we'll actually be doing the whole build live. So you can build right along with me, or then go back and refer to it. And we'll have everything in that one video. So a router plane, a lot in demand, and it's one thing that you can make very easily. And I probably made 5 or 6 of them on this channel now. So what's one more? We'll have some fun with that. So, ready to dive in?
Absolutely.
So what we've got here is a piece of wood that Mark brought in. We're going to be using his tools so we can learn from his point of view rather than using what I've got. This is a piece of what I'm assuming is red oak. Looks like it, although it does have a little bit of a tone to it that would make me think white oak. We'll have to see a little bit more, but my guess is a red oak. It is flat sawn. So Melody, can you focus in on this? I don't know if we can see this on here. The rings come up and across here, but you notice that this is actually cupped. So if I put a flat edge here, there's a bit of a gap down underneath. And so we want to get rid of that cupping and get this thing flat. That means we need to take away material here on the arch, and we need to take away material here and here, but we don't need to take away a material here where it's low. And opposite thing on this side, this will rock a bit side to side, so that means we need to take material in here. So, and the other thing on this one is it actually has a bit of a rock to it. So if I put it flat on my bench, it tips this way. So that means that the whole thing is twisted that way. Does that make sense? Absolutely. Now, one of the things I have on my bench is my bench isn't perfectly flat. So I move it over to a couple different places. I'll check it here, and then I'll check it here. And I see no matter where I put it, except for that spot, I know that my bench is twisted that way. It's always going to rock this way. And so that lets me know it's always twisted that way. Now we're going to look at a couple other methods for finding that out with winding sticks and such. But just going to give an overlay to the board, we want to know, what does the board have? We want to know where is it high, where is it low, before we start diving into it. You don't want to just start planing away from it, because if you take material from the spots that are low, well, then that's going to reduce the thickness of the whole board. And this particular board right now is, it's about 0.8. And if we want a 3/4 inch board out of this, that's very little material to work with. And I doubt we're going to be able to get 3/4 out of this because that cup is just so big. So my guess is we'll get 5/8 maybe.
That'd be great.
But we'll see. So that's one of the things with the more cup you have in it, the less material you're going to get out, because you have to take off more material on both sides, which means a thinner board. The next thing comes for holding it. I like to hold between dogs, so I'll put dogs in my vise, clamp it in place, the whole thing stays in place. I don't have to worry about it, it's just locked down. Dogs are quick and easy. But there are lots of other ways to do it. You can actually have stop boards. So a board that's on here, you take your hold fast, and you would lock down a stop board. And that would lock up against it, and so you can plane into the stop board, or you'd have another board over here. Or I could even put pegs that I can then plane up against if I'm putting across it. There's lots of different ways to do it. I just like going between dogs because it's fast, it's easy, it's locked in place, and I don't have to think about it, and I'm on the wrong camera. Sorry about that. So I'm going to put in these ones. Let me see how much space do I have. Yeah, I can use this one. Cool. So you can back that out. And these are actually aluminum. So they're safe for the plane if I do accidentally hit it, but I do want to have it a little bit below the end of the board there. So something like that. And then I'm going to have it off the board just a little bit. Go ahead and crank it down.
Okay. That's not going to
Keep
cause it to
tight.
warp?
Nope.
Okay.
Now, if it were thinner, it might cause it to pop up, in which case then you just back off the pressure just a little bit.
Okay.
But this is thick enough that that amount of pressure is not going to cause it. But right now it's locked in there, so I can plane across this and not have much of a problem. It's going to slip a little bit because there's always a little bit of a jam in there, but if it turns one way or the other, then that's the way it is. And then if I plane endwise, it's between stops that way. So now let's do a little bit closer look at this and find out where we are. Now I have winding sticks here. Can you show these? And on the ends of these, I have this dark space and the white space. Those are special. They're nice. They're not necessary. I have little dots in the middle. Basically, all winding sticks are boards that are parallel. So I know that the thickness here is the exact same along it.
Okay, Melody,
And the thickness
can you
here
focus it a little
is
bit
the
better?
exact same along it. Can you zoom in out a little bit?
Can you? Yeah, it's just not quite focused.
So this edge is parallel to this edge. Even if these two boards were different heights, that's perfectly fine as long as this edge is parallel to this edge. And that will let me know when I put it on here that this higher edge is showing me whatever the lower edge is showing me.
Okay.
Also, you generally want the sticks to be a little longer than your board. That will exaggerate any cup and twist in the board so that when the stick comes out here, any little movement here represents a large movement on the other end. So I'm going to put one on this end and put one on this end, and we want to look down these. So now one of the problems we have is that these rock this way. So if I set it on here, right now it's resting on this far edge in the middle, and it's high up over there.
Right.
Same thing with this one. And so the problem with that is if I were to plane that, it would have me planing all of this side down until this side met that side. What I want to do is just plane the middle down and flatten that out.
Okay.
So I have two different ways of looking at the winding sticks. Number one, I can make sure that they're both leaning middle to this edge, middle to this edge, and that will let me know if there's any twist in the board. Or I could shim out this side so that I have the same amount of thickness here as I do there. And so usually I just go with the easier method because right now we just want to get an eye. So we're going to get down here and they're resting middle to this far edge. And looking at them this way, I want to lower my eye until one edge is just touching. Keep my head at that same point and look over at the other side. And I can tell this side is high and that side is high.
Agreed.
Which
Just a hair, but yes.
is a little bit surprising because the board, when I was doing the rock test, it was saying that it was twisted the other way, that these were the low spots and these were the high spots.
Okay, the chat has a very serious question right
What's
now.
that?
And I'm not going to tell you why I'm asking this question. But does a vise count as a tool?
That's a really good question. It depends on how you measure a tool. Historically, a tool was something that cut the wood. So a hammer was not a tool. A clamp was not a tool. A bench was not a tool. It was chisels and planes and saws. And you would actually see tool lists that wouldn't have the bench listed in it. It's like the most important tool in the shop wouldn't actually be listed in the tool list. So yeah, it just depends on how you want to list it.
Okay, but they need you to say yes or no.
Oh, they need me to say is a vise a tool?
For right now, we need a yes or a no. I'm not telling you why, but you just need to decide if it's a yes or a no at this point.
If I'm listing out a tool list for a build, I am not going to list a vise.
So the answer is no. And it's all, okay, keep going.
It's kind of one of those given things, like a bench. I never list the bench.
I'll tell you later.
Yeah. Okay, so at this point, it really doesn't matter too much.
Okay.
We need to get this surface flat. And from the point, it looks like this is a little bit higher than that height, but not much. These winding sticks actually aren't off by that much. I mean, that's really close. That is almost within acceptability. It's off a little bit, but yeah, well. We know that the middle is very high, though.
Right.
So we want to get the middle down to equal with the two sides.
Okay.
Now, with how thick it is, we've got about an 1/8 inch gap here.
Yeah.
And so if I split this off, we got about a 16th inch here and 16th inch here. So that means that the middle is up 1/16 of an inch.
Okay.
So 1/16 is about the thickness of one scrub pass. And that makes me a little leery because I don't want to take off any more than I absolutely have to. So for my board, I would grab a number 4 or a number 5 and just start planing across that.
Okay.
But on this one, you have a scrub plane here. Melody, can you zoom in on this? I want to see this mouth on this. The mouth here, on this one, his scrub plane is actually fairly flat but has rounded wings. And so it's kind of halfway between a scrub plane and a normal bench plane. And in this case, this one's not going to be able to take off that much. So this would actually be really good for this surfacing.
Okay.
If you look at my scrub plane, it's got really heavy camber all the way across.
Right.
And this will take off almost an 1/8 inch per pass.
Oh my.
And this one, this is my fine one, and it's a camber all the way across. This will do about 1/16 inch. And so that's what I'll have on mine. So
Sorry, what is the difference here? Because I do have a camber on mine.
this one,
but
it's flat across here and then cambered on the sides.
Ah.
So it's very little camber across the middle
see.
of the blade.
I see. Okay.
Whereas these are a perfect round.
Okay.
So here, you have a plain iron to adjust, or I don't know what you like to adjust with.
That'll be
Why
fine.
don't you go ahead and adjust that out? And so what we're going to do is we're going to traverse the board. So that means the plane going across the grain. And the reason for that is it's actually easier to push across the grain than it will be to push with the grain when you're taking out large chunks. If you're just taking out thin curls, it's easier to go with the grain. And we want it to be cutting down about a 32nd inch, so a really heavy cut.
Too much. Still too much.
Wooden planes are fun.
Especially on camera for the first time.
Well, the interesting thing is with the regular scrub planes, they're still hammer adjusted, but they have the wedge loosens with a nut, and so you can actually do a little bit more adjustment. And having the big camber on them, the adjustment is very accurate. If you're doing something thinner,
Too much?
yeah, we'll find out. So I'm going to start here in the middle. Yeah, that's a bit too much. That one's nice. It's got a good hold.
eBay special.
Yeah, let's give that a try. There we go. And so you can see I'm starting here, and I'm going to here. And I'm not really caring about anything. I just want to get rid of that. So I want you to do that across. Now, one of the other things we're going to find is that this board actually has a cavity in it.
That's loud.
Cool. Just take it all the way to the end. And this cavity is going to cause us all sorts of issues, which you just ran into. So usually, I wouldn't want to use this board. Melody, can you zoom in on this spot right here? Once you get there, I'll check on something. And so what happens is sometimes you'll get where the tree rings don't actually laminate together. And so we have one ring that is separating. And that's right here. And so it's going to give us this big gap chip out in here. So normally if I'm looking at a board, I'd look at that and I say, we don't want to use this one because we're always going to have that gap. You're never going to get rid of it completely. But for demonstration's sake, it's great. It causes all sorts of issues. When you hit that, it's going to be blowing out chips. So now, this looks really, really rough. It looks really, really bad, which is exactly what we want at this stage. So we're going to put these on here. And now we can see we've got a bit of a gap here and here. And we've got a bit of a gap here and here, but the sticks are still leaning this way just a little bit. And I'm not going to worry about the wind right now because we're hitting that. I want to try and make it a little bit flatter across there. So let's do one more pass.
Okay.
But on this pass, because the sticks are still leaning a little bit this way, we want to start at the same point, and I want to go through and exit just before going out the other side. So the cut should stop, a half inch or so from the other side.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect. Cool.
Apologies.
That's fine. Oak. I love the smell.
So we have a super chat.
Oh, we do. What we got?
So Alan donated to Sarah's Cocoa Fund.
Woo! What did Alan say?
Sarah's Cocoa Fund.
Ah.
Profound words.
Oh, that's nice. Okay, so we're setting it on here, and now we've got ever so slight twist the other way. On this one, we still have a bit of a belly here. It's just a little bit of a gap front and back, but we're pretty good flat across. Here, pretty good flat across. Here, Melody, can you zoom in across the stick here? I want to be able to see the full length of it. As we're putting them on here, you'll see spots where it's a scalloped edge. It's not clean. It is a bit of a mess all the way across there. That's perfectly fine. It's a scrub plane. But you can see it's touching most of the ridges across there, about 50% of them. There's still a little bit of gap one end and the other. But wherever I put it, it's pretty good. That's right about where we want it to be. And that's the point at which you stop the scrub. The scrub plane doesn't make the board look good. It just gets it really close where it's touching the straight edge 50% of the time. Now we're going to bring in
No.
we're going to bring in
Now
the
you're
number
going to bring
5.
in the mom joke.
Oh, yes, the mom joke.
Ready?
What do we got?
What do you call an all marsupial fighting championship?
Marsupial fighting what?
Mortal Wombat.
What? Oh,
Mortal
mortal.
Wombat.
Like. Okay, so number 5 with a fairly heavy set. I mean, you put your finger on there and it's sticking out a good bit. We're probably 100th, maybe 150th, 175th.
We should do metric.
It's a little thicker than 100th. And as you run it, I'm not really hitting much here, and then I'll be hitting these high spots. Last time we went kind of at an angle this way. Now we're going to turn and go kind of at an angle this way.
Okay.
And so I'm just going to start here. I just want it to be fuzzing through them. So it's just hitting the high spots. I'm just going to do it one more. And here on that second pass, it was hitting a lot more.
Mm-hmm. Is the point to go the opposite direction of the scallops? Is
Yep.
that okay?
Because right now we got all these grooves running this way. If we run with that, we're going to be falling into that groove.
Gotcha.
If we go this way, we're just going to hit the high spots as we're
Okay.
going to cross it.
Okay.
All of flattening a board is just about hitting the high spots. So anytime you can create a hill where the front touches the top of the hill and the back touches the top of the hill and the mouth doesn't, that's what you want.
Okay.
Because as the plane goes across it, it's then only going to hit the hills. It won't ever hit the valley.
Okay.
But if the plane runs down the valley, now it will take out more thickness in the valley, and you don't want to do that.
Right.
So you always want to go across the hills. So let's actually see if that gave us a little smoothness we want. Yeah, see, that's a lot better. There's still a few gaps in here. Mm-hmm. And we're going to have to take off a little more. So we're going to set this a little bit deeper. Just a little bit. And then why don't you do... see, it's looking pretty good here, but we still have some scallops over here.
Yeah.
So why don't you do 1 or 2 more passes across the board from one side to the other.
Okay.
And at this point, it's kind of going back and forth. You're just kind of chasing perfection. You're going to never get there, but eventually it's going to be a little bit better than it was before. And again! Okay, Melody, can you zoom in on this gap here, Mel? Yeah. Okay. Yep, I will in a moment. So what we've got here is we're starting to get really nice and smooth, except for this big gap. And no matter what we're going to do, this gap is just going to get more and more because there's no lamination here. So we're just shaving a splinter. So normally at this point we'd throw away the board.
Right.
But this is one of the things we want to be careful of because if we're planing this way, we're going to be blowing off little bits that are hanging off. If we plane this way, well then we're going to be blowing off the little bits on this side of it because it comes up into a ridge there.
Right.
If we plane this way, we might save a little bit more.
Okay.
Here, let me back this up a little bit more.
If I were to take a chisel along here to sort of cut away the
Not
extra.
really going to help you much.
Understood.
The other thing we've got here is you can see some of the original rough sawn here, but we're now planed across, and we have new fresh wood running all the way across the board except for a few touching spots. So let's do one more on this and see what we've got here. The first side is usually the side that takes the most. Now here I've actually got a little bit of a rock, just a hair, and that's probably just due to this being a little spongy, where they have that gap. So move it over here. Yeah, see, that's what I'm looking for. We still have a little bit of a gap there where we see the raw wood, but it's pretty well smooth now, or it's pretty well flat. And twist-wise, is really happy. Here, why don't you check it out?
All right.
If
Ever so slightly, these two sides are a little bit high, but not by much. For most applications, that is well within
A hair.
Tolerances. So we've gotten it flat, but all of our shavings have been going across the board, and this surface is really rough. So at this point, I want to smooth it. So I don't want to grab my smoothing plane yet. Most of the time, actually, let's do it with this one. I'm going to back the iron off a little bit more. So we're taking about 1/100 now.
Okay.
And this one, the grain's going that way, as you should be. So now we're going to do full-length passes, starting one side, going across the other. And we're just going to smooth out. We probably need a little more. Yeah, it needs a good bit more. Why don't you make it a little bit more?
Yeah.
I want to make it actually take some shavings.
See, that's actually...
And you'll still hear it skipping because we created all those ridges, and now it's coming through and removing those ridges in between. Why don't you take a little deeper than that? Yeah. And so now we're actually smoothing out the board and cleaning things up. Especially along this edge, you'll have some high spots here, and so we still want to take off, a good bit of thickness here still. But from here on out, the board starts to get a little more pretty.
So are you not using the pencil tip because it's a smaller board?
Well, I'll get to that in a minute. At this point, we're still kind of, when you're working something to flat, the pencil really doesn't help out much. When you are wanting to know what have you hit and what you haven't hit, for smoothing it out, that's where the pencil really comes in. And at this point, because we're hitting here, you can see a nice smooth spot here, and we're not hitting much here, because we have scrubbed out a little bit this area. And so now that we went across the board this way, now we're going with the board, so now we're hitting the mountains this way, because last time we created them that way. And so now we're actually creating mountains this way, which we will address with our final smoothing. But right now we're getting rid of all of these scrub plane marks.
Okay.
So why don't you set it just a little bit deeper, because we need to get down through a bit here.
All right.
This is a really, yeah, there's a good zip. You hear the high-pitched wheeze of it. Lets you know you got a good shaving on there.
There's the stip.
Yep. There it goes. Okay, there we go. So right now, I would probably do another 2 or 3 passes normally, but for sake of video, we're going to pause right here. And it's now, Melody, can you give me the whole board here? Now it's smoothish. This is a functional surface. Now, if I wanted to get this down a little bit more, we'd then bring in our smoothing plane, and we do a few passes with that. Now, normally when I do the smoothing plane, rather than going with the board, I'm actually going to go ever so slightly off, so like 10 degrees off angle, and that just allows me to then hit those hills that I created this way. We should just do one pass with this. A little bit more. So we're getting the plane tracks. What's happening is this blade is actually leaning this way. So I'm taking off more material on this side. So I'm getting a plane track there.
Right.
And the way you do that is you actually want it leaning the other way to create a plane track on this side. And with this edge of the blade just ever so slightly inside. And that way as you go across the board, this one will clean up the plane track from the previous stroke.
Okay.
So if we're leaning out that way, move it this way, just by feel to right there. Let's see what that goes like. Yeah. So I'm looking in here and I'm getting shavings off of this side and not off of that side. And you can see as I go, there's plane tracks here.
Right.
And then the next pass will then remove the previous plane track. And that's with taking a fairly heavy cut. Ooh, that actually feels really good. Now I'm going to level it out so it's cutting flat across. And I'm going to back it off so it's doing a little bit thinner cut. I really don't want to take off anything at this point. And then just work the wheel until it catches. There we go. Not quite that much. There we go. Light width. And now I'm going with it, so I'm going across those hills that I just created. There. That feels nice.
Agreed.
Here, let me try. Why don't you do a few passes with that?
Doesn't he make it look so easy, Mark?
Here, do a couple passes with that one.
Well, especially the way those tracks just disappeared. Like, that wouldn't happen with me.
Well, and I don't actually camber the corners of my smoothing plane because if I'm taking a really light, wispy shaving, you don't see the tracks if it's a truly thin shaving. Here a second.
I just did that wrong. I should have done it at a slight angle, shouldn't I?
No, that's what you want.
You're
It's
giving
smoothing.
him the wax?
Nice.
He's nicer
Try
to
that.
you.
Did he not give you the wax?
No. I always had to do it the hard way.
I remember posting once on the forum, I think I was on Facebook, saying, I'm cutting this poplar and I'm working up such a sweat and I'm getting so tired. And I don't know, I think you made fun of me, like, poplar? Yeah, wax helps.
And one of the things you'll notice, especially with the smoothing plane, is you'll be playing along, and you may have noticed here you weren't taking any shavings. And that's because there's actually a slight belly there.
Okay.
And so one side of the plane was sitting on the mountain, the other side of the plane was sitting on the mountain, and the iron was resting between it.
Right.
And so if you take two passes in the same spot, it's taking off such a thin shaving that the tiny thickness between those, it won't take a third shaving. So as long as, that's why I'll always do the smoothing pass. As long as you're taking really thin shaving, you're not going to create those hills.
Okay.
And so there, now we've got a beautiful smooth surface that should be true or close enough.
It's flat. Let's see.
Yeah, that's darn right acceptable. And so theoretically, if I put the stick on here at any point, it should be touching all the way along that stick. And that's pretty. So we now have a reference face. And this is what everything else needs to be measured off of. Some people, let me swing this down. Some people will start with a reference edge. I prefer to start with a reference face because I find it easier to measure an edge off of a face than it is to measure a face off of an edge. But some people like to do it that way. So now we're going to take this and we're going to put it in the vise.
So I have a question.
What's that?
Because you said, like, because it's got that split, whatever,
worry.
that normally you would just toss that board and whatever.
Yep.
Now, what if you wanted it for in there for whatever reason, sentimental value? Like, would epoxy, like if you finish it with like an epoxy or something, would that
Well,
fit from? I'm just asking. I really don't know.
yeah, you could do like a penetrating epoxy to try and get down in there before you plane it, and that would stabilize a few things together as long as you didn't take off too much. So what I could do is scrub it down close to where I wanted to, put in the penetrating epoxy to hold it all together, then plane it flat, and then I'd have to fill in gaps if I wanted that smoothness. But an epoxy fill in that case would look really weird because it's very rare to see an epoxy fill in the middle of a flat sawn piece. It's just kind of odd. So
And this would also be acceptable for the use if it was on the back of something or you know.
Yeah, and often when you have this on a flat sawn, you're going to have it on one side, and the other side will be fine. Because as the curl comes out, well, on this one, you're going to have a little chip out here.
Yeah.
But a lot of times the curl doesn't make it out the other side. So, okay, so we have a reference face. Now we want a reference edge. And the easy way to do that is this. So I can just put this on here and know where I'm at. Now I could bring out the winding sticks and do exactly the same thing. And with these exaggerated sticks, I would see a really exaggerated amount of twist on here. Or they'd be dead perfect to begin with. Here, I should actually flip this over because I think the other side is worse.
Bad example.
Yeah, oh yeah, the other side is rough sawn. There we go. So this side, Melody, zoom in on this right here. This side here is really, really, really rough. So we've got...
Whoa, back up, sis.
Yeah, focus on it. No, right there. It's fine. Just focus. So we've got a big gap right here, and it is out of square. So we want to make sure we take off material on the side that's high and not the side that's low. So when we plane that, I'm going to start off with the number 5. And so the idea is I want to lean it to the side I want. And the easiest way to do that is actually to slide the plane over. Here, Melody, focus in on the plane here. Can you lift up a little bit more? So I want to actually slide it over to let the weight of the plane pull it that way.
Okay.
So if this is sitting on here, lift it up so I can see the plane, Melody. If I have it centered on the board, it's going to naturally rest on that surface. But if I slide it over so it's overhanging this side, it's going to want, the weight is going to want to pull it this way naturally. And so my body then is what's actually guiding it. Okay. I'm also going to have my finger over here, and my finger then becomes the fence for it. And so I'll be pinching the side of the blade here. So as I come along, I can feel square with my finger, and eventually, over time, your finger starts to know what 90 degrees feels like, and you don't think about it. But that takes a little while. Now we got a lot of material to go through, so I'm going to cut it down a little bit heavier. Sounds bad, but actually works pretty well. So I've gotten rid of most of the marks. And if I had to guess, I'm ever so slightly out the other way. I think I turned it a little bit too far. So now I can bring this in, and we can see, yep, I took it out too far the other way. So I'll let you do a few passes the other way.
Okay.
And so just have it lean the other side. Just 2 passes should be all that it needs for bringing it back in. And a lot of times just having that weight on there is all it needs to bring it right back in.
Oh, interesting.
That is dead on. Nice work, man.
Excellent.
So now we've done the rough work with that, really heavy cut. This is still set up for as a smoother. Just need one end-to-end pass.
Just sort of dead center, I'm assuming? Okay.
Just let it reference on that main surface. You may notice that it catches right at the beginning and right at the end. That's just because it naturally creates a little bit of camber. There you go. And so then let's do a final check on here.
Maybe a little more there. It's still a little
more there? Okay. Yeah. That's pretty. Okay, now, before we do anything else, we want to notate that this is our reference face and a reference edge. And the best way to do that is you take a pencil. Melody, can you lift it up so you can actually see what I'm doing down here? And I'm going to create an arrow that points to our reference face. And then on the reference face, I'm going to create...
Do you think you're on that camera?
No, I'm not. She's not lifting it up high enough yet, so I can't move it over.
Matt, oh.
I'm getting myself high.
Yeah, I'll work with you later on it. So then I got a curly Q on this side. So it's just a little curly Q. And this is an old design. Here. Okay, focus on that. And this lets you know your reference face and your reference edge. So we have an arrow here pointing at our reference face. And on our reference face, we have a little curly Q matching up with that arrow. And so whenever we're using this board, we're always measuring off of this edge and this face. So if we're ever squaring anything or we're cutting to it, we're putting the fence of our square on the reference face or on the reference edge. We never come over the other way because this is never our reference face. It's always this one. So that arrow stays on there for the rest of our work until we're ready to clean it up, and then we take one little pass to remove the shaving, to remove the mark. But throughout the rest of our work, we know that these are the sides we're measuring everything else off of. And just having that on there lets you know that the rest of your work is going to be just as true as your initial work. So, let's clean this off. Now, theoretically, we no longer need the winding sticks. These are not necessary from anything else on this because we have the rest of this face. Everything can be then referenced off of the first face. So I want to grab my marking gauge. And with the marking gauge, we want to put the fence on a reference face. And I'm going to put it on the board, and I'm going to find the thinnest point of the board. So I'm going to find the pin. So it should be somewhere here in the middle. And I'm just going to tentatively lock it on that point. And I'm going to run around and see if that pin falls off at any point. See, on this side, that's right about the thin spot. Mm-hmm. So the pin is finding out what's the thinnest point in the board. And it happens to be midpoint here and here.
Okay.
And if my bench were perfectly flat, right now this would sit on here and it wouldn't rock. But it is going to rock a little bit because my bench isn't perfectly flat. It's a little more flat over here. And no bench is ever perfectly true. It's something, it's wood, it comes out. Yeah, no, it's still out there. There we go, that's a little better. Still a little bit out, but I gotta do that. So whenever you're checking for flat, don't trust that your bench is flat. Even if you just flattened your bench, trust the winding sticks. Don't trust the bench. The winding sticks won't lie, your bench will, because it will always move. So if there's ever a discrepancy between winding sticks and bench, trust the winding sticks, not the bench. And then go put the winding sticks in your bench and you're like, oh, it is out of flat.
There's still a little bit of original wood right here too, and that might just be at that corner.
Yep. So now we've set this up to the minimum thickness, the smallest spot. I can use this to then make a mark. Oop, I just moved it. I didn't tighten it down all the way. So let's put that in here. Clamp it down. We'll make a mark all the way around the board. And the nice thing about this is we just plane down until we hit that mark, and we know that the other side is then perfectly flat because it is parallel to the side we're referencing off of. Everything is marked off of the side we're referencing off of. Sorry, did you want to do this? So now we have that in place. We're going to put it right back into the same jig, and we're going to basically go over the exact same steps. Let's get it back up a good ways. There we go. Push that down just a little bit there. Cool. Now, we don't want to hit the middle spot like we did last time. We want to hit this side and this side. But we now have this really convenient line to look at and always know exactly where we're at.
Right.
So we can grab the scrub plane again. At this point, I'm just going to start here. And theoretically, it shouldn't hit anything here when I go across. Oh, it is. So we're taking off a little bit too much. This one is nice and tight. Let me grab this one, Bertha. This is DFM Toolworks, one of my favorites. Yeah, there we go. Okay, that's not quite, that's too much now. Need a little more than that. There we go. And we could take off a little bit more than that. But this one's kind of fun, because you can see that. Now, here, Melody, focus on this corner here. Now, as we're traversing the plane, we want to be careful because there's a chance we're going to blow out. On the first side, it really didn't matter that much because we can always trim off the edge. The other thing you'll notice here is I have the rough sawn edge on the far side. and I have our first surface on this side.
Right.
So I'm never hurting my original
Okay.
edge. I always have the side that I'm going to be planing off on the other side. So if any problems, I plane it off.
Okay.
So what we've got here is we got this little split out here. And that's because we're running off the board. Now, one of the things I want to know is that you see it split off right to that mark. That marking gauge line actually created a natural spot where it wants to split. So if your marking gauge line is nice and hard, it's going to create a spot where it naturally breaks off and doesn't go below that.
Okay.
But for safety's sake, you can take your scrub plane and just run across that and take it down to your marking gauge line. Right about there. Actually, it's ever so slightly above it. And so now when I go across and I come out the other side, I'm not going to blow out anything past because it's now protected with that little chamfer.
Right.
Okay, let's see where we're at. Now, I'm always going to be looking at this line, and I've got a pretty heavy amount here, but it's pretty close to equal on the other side. So we're doing pretty good. And we're hitting right on this edge, and we're hitting on this edge. We're not hitting anything in the middle. We like that. The ideal is, on our last pass, the scrub plane won't touch a line running right down the middle, and the first couple passes from the plane will go all the way across and take perfect shavings all the way across the board.
Okay.
So theoretically, to get the perfect thickness of the board, the first plane to actually hit that middle area is your number 5, and then you come through and smooth it and finish it.
Okay.
So here, why don't you do a few more? Get an eye on this. And here's one other thing. On this corner here, it's a bit higher here than it is there, because there's a natural tendency to actually start in a little ways, and so you'll usually miss your starting corner.
Right.
And so your first pass was in
I see.
about 3/4 of an inch.
Okay.
So just make 2 passes right on the corner before you start in. Yeah, that brings it down. Now, we just hit that line.
Right.
So that second pass was actually a bit too much, but we're right, we're close to it.
Okay.
So now we just don't want to hit that corner at all.
All right. Repeat what I did before. Okay.
Yep. There we go. Yeah, perfect. Okay, now we hit the line from here to here. We're dead on across there. We got this big lump here. So what we need to do, we also look back in here, and there's a larger area where it isn't hit. So we just need to hit this little pocket right here.
And not on this side because it's
Yeah, on
it's
this side it
perfect
looks like we went just a hair past the line there. And we got, it's a bit thick here. And so I'm just looking at the line going all the way around and seeing there's a few spots where we're high, and a few spots where we're not, and a few spots where we're right on the line. And it's usually about this point, I'm going to, especially if I'm using a heavy scrub, I'm going to stop and not scrub anymore. And so I'd come in with our 5, which is set up pretty heavy. And again, I'm going to go at an opposite, and I'm just going to hit those spots that are high. So like that spot there, I'm going to come over here. I'm just going to hit this down to the line. And we had another spot over here. There we go. So, I'm not taking anything special. I'm just hitting those high spots. And so theoretically, if I brought the winding sticks in here, other than a few little high spots, we should be pretty good. Now that one has actually left a surface that's right about where I'd expect this to be leaving it. So this is actually a really nice surface from the scrub plane. From my scrub plane, it don't look that pretty. Whew, it's warm in here. So rather than doing this, because we've gotten to that line, normally with the scrub plane I'm going to stay just a hair away from that line because this can take it to the line. But that one's actually taking off a thin amount that it's kind of doing what this does. Though usually on your second surface, you're taking off a lot of material. Because your first surface, you're taking off the minimum amount needed to make it flat. And then your second surface, you're taking off everything to bring it to your thickness.
Okay.
So usually you'd be working with like a 1-inch board taking on a 3/4. So your first side, you're taking off like a 1/16. Well, that means you need to take off 3/16 on the other side.
Right.
So usually your second side is what you're really scrubbing.
Okay.
So now we're going to actually come in with this. And I'm going to do a full length this way. Yeah, that's sounding about the way I want it to. Just kind of skipping across everything but the high spots. And that can be very, very frustrating. It's like you're not getting anything done. And so the tendency is, let's crank it down and make it heavier.
Gotcha. Okay.
Don't.
Mistake number 1.
Yeah. Just do like 3 or 4 passes where you're just hitting. But I just realized in this case we are taking actually off too thin because we're still set up for the fine shaving at the end. So I'm going to take it out just a little bit more. Yeah. Still skipping, but we're actually taking something off now. So don't get frustrated and say you need to do it heavier unless you need to do it heavier. There. Okay, so we've gotten a few spots on here where we hit a little bit much with the scrub plane. There's a couple spots here. So I'm getting down here, I'm kind of looking at letting the light bounce off it, and I'm seeing what tracks I still had that were going across and which tracks have disappeared. So I think 2 more passes with that and we should be able to get rid of 99% of them.
All right. May I?
Yep. I need to hire an apprentice. Cool. Yeah, that's looking good now. We've gotten rid of, I think, pretty much everything other than a few little dip-offs here and there.
Yeah, a
A little deep there. Normally what you're going to do when you're marking the thickness of the marking gauge around the board, normally you're shooting for a specific thickness. I want it to be 3/4 inch. And so you'd set your mark at like 3/4 inch plus 1/100th. You want to leave that little shaving because you can always make the board thinner. If you set it right at that and you accidentally hit your mark with your scrub, then you got to take off a little bit more. But in this case, we want to get as much out of it as we can. And so we're not really worrying about how thick it is. We just want to get the thickest board. And there are times where I really don't care what the thickness of this. I just want to get the thickness I can get out of it. In which case, here you go. So we've done that. So the next thing would be to set it up a little bit lighter and do a smoothing pass and just do it like 10 degrees off angle.
All right.
Okay, can I throw a question?
Yep.
Because they're asking about questions. So I don't know if you've answered this one yet. Alex wants to know, when fixing twist in a board, when do you declare it done?
When it's sufficient for the task at hand. That's usually far sooner than you expect it to be. Don't chase perfection. Perfection doesn't exist. It's a direction, not a location.
Not quite.
Just a little more.
Is that enough?
Probably just a tiny hair more. That's like the final smoothing, finishing, fuzzing. About halfway between the last one and that one.
Too much?
That's a hair too much. But then you got to back it off and then move it forward again.
Let me finish up that pass here.
What you can sometimes do is when it's too much and you need to back the iron off, all you do is you take the pressure off the wheel as if you're backing it up just a little bit.
Right.
And then what happens is as you're pushing it, that iron slides back to that stop.
Okay.
And so that's why when you loosen it up and you want to back it up, you back it, and then you run the iron forward.
Okay.
You run the yoke forward until it pushes the iron in place.
Okay.
Because that yoke is always stopping the iron from backing up.
Right.
So if you just want to back up the iron a hair bit, you can just loosen it a moment, and it will back up to whatever that was loosened at.
Okay, that's really good advice.
So you take 2 or 3 shavings at the old setting, and it slowly gets thinner and thinner. Now it's probably not taking anything.
Give her just a little. Sure.
Actually, that's perfect. Yeah, no, that's great. That's where I would leave it for the finishing.
Okay.
I mean, I don't see any plane tracks in it other than just a few fuzzes, but nothing.
Maybe one here.
Yeah, and those are things you're going to clean up just before you put the finish on it.
Right.
So that is well within acceptability. And so at this point, wrong way. Now we have reference face, reference edge, matching face. Well, the matching edge, we can do exactly what we did before. And we will then square it up, not to this new face, but to the original reference face. So we want to make sure it's this way, not this way. Because if there's any error, we're just compounding it one more time.
Okay.
So we always make sure that our fences are referencing off the original reference face. Then we come to the ends. And normally this is where I'd pull out the shooting board, set it on there with our original reference edge up against the fence. So we're nowhere 90 degrees to the original, not the secondary.
Okay.
And then you can shoot it. But I want to show how to do it freehand.
Ooh.
So let me grab the squares I need. So all you need is a square. And I'm going to shoot with a low angle plane. So for freehand, the trick is, here, my Melody, come on over here. Lift the camera up to here. There you go. Now, focus down on the end of the board. So what we want to do is, just like before, I'm going to pinch the side here, and I'm going to push through, but I don't want to come out the other side. I want to plane from this side to about there.
Okay.
And stop an inch or so away from this.
Okay.
So let's see what you got. Yeah, very good, Ro. So I'm going to come in here. What in the hoot? Oh my. I need to adjust this.
How do we even know if this is a straight?
Well, that's what the square is here for. What in the world?
Okay. Yeah, it's actually there's a little bit of a belly here. I don't know if that's the right term.
I'm having issues.
Can I throw a question at you while you're
Yeah,
looking
go
at
for
that?
it.
Okay, so James Shramek wants to
have to adjust that
know,
one.
is a wooden router plane better or equal to a cast one?
Equal. It just all comes down to details in it. There's really not. Functionally, they'll do exactly the same thing as long as they have the same devices of depth stop and adjustability to it. So, not that big a deal. Yeah, and I used a wooden one for quite a while until I got a metal one. The nice thing with the metal is it doesn't move, it doesn't change. It's always flat. And you can really crank down on it and feel good about it. With a wooden one, you crank down on it and you'll crush something in the wood. So.
But the metal ones rust, which I just found out the other day.
Yes. So I'm going to use my my 5.5, because I don't use it very often. I'm just testing to make sure it is sharp. So what I want to do here is I want the fence with the reference on our reference edge, not on the secondary edge.
Okay.
Especially because we haven't done the secondary edge yet. So I'm going to put it on there, and I'm going to slide this down, and we can see how we're touching this far edge to the middle, but we're not touching at all on the far edge over here. There's nothing touching here. So we want to make sure all of our planing is from here to here and not going out the other side.
Okay.
And with this one, it's going to take a little bit more. And on every pass, I want to make sure I'm coming all the way back past so that the iron catches it. Because if I'm just doing here in the middle, eventually I'm going to do an area, and I just created 2 mounds that the iron is just sliding in between.
Right.
So let's see what we got with that. A little bit closer. Just keep it going. And as I get closer, as I get closer, I do want to make sure that I am still square with my original reference face. And yeah, we're still square there, but are we square this way? Ooh, getting close. We're pretty well flat from here across to here, but we're just missing that little spot right there at the corner. You want to do a few?
Please. Just how sharp does your iron have to be for this, for cutting an end grain like this?
Pretty sharp. Right now, mine's at about 150, 200. Yeah, the trick is just making sure you stop before going out the other side, but still going farther than your hill. Because you're going to be naturally stopping and you create a hill right here.
Yes.
And so now, when we put this on here, you're probably going to see a high spot right there.
I can already see it, yeah.
And we're not touching back here. So you need to make sure you plane at least to there, but not past there.
Okay, and I need to hit more here as well?
No, you're doing pretty good. Just make sure you come all the way past.
Okay.
You just want to make sure you don't hit the camera with your feet, Melody. You want to make sure you plane out far enough, but don't go off the end. That's where the skill comes in with doing freehand.
Here we go.
Okay, let's check that. That's looking pretty good. Okay, we're really good there.
I actually went
Yeah, we're touching right here. So we're touching here, but we're not touching out here. So this is really good. So we just need to take out this space here. So now what we want to do is actually turn around and come at it from the other side. But rather than letting the iron start from out here, we want to let the iron start right just inside of it and get rid of the hill right here.
Right.
And so the nice thing about coming from both sides, now normally I walk around the other way, but my camera's over there. We get to do a little Japanese work here. And so the nice thing about coming from both sides is if you never plane out the other end of the board, you're always going to create a hill on the other end of the board.
Okay.
So if you never go out the board, you're always going to have a flat line going from one way to the other. And so you're always just taking down the high spot until it's flat. And if you take it down just a little too far, then you come from the other side and you take that side down just until it's flat.
Okay.
And if you take one more shaving, it's this way, and then it's just doing a seesaw. You're always having a flat plane all the way across there.
Okay.
It's just at what angle is that flat plane at?
Okay.
And that's where the square comes in. And so here, that's pretty much within tolerance unless you're doing something, because we just got that little 1/8 inch or so right at the end. That's a board. And so that's all there is to thicknessing a board. Now, what did we end up with? Let's find out. Ooh, how accurate was I? Just a little off. So we're at 0.705. So just under 3/4 of an inch, which is actually better than I thought we could do. That's actually really good. Nice work, man.
Thank you.
So yeah, my guess is red oak.
Yeah.
It does look like a very red oak. The medullary rays are a lot smaller. Normally with white oak, the medullary rays are like 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch, and with red oak, they tend to be 1/4 inch.
Okay.
So, cool. What questions we have before we wrap up, babe?
Okay, so I'm not sure if you answered this one, but Smuggle Me Zyra asked, is it bad to chamfer the end and plane all the way through?
Oh yeah, like we were doing with the flat surfacing. Now chamfer the far side so you don't blust it out. You just want to make sure that your chamfer doesn't go too far. So that's why you always have the side that you haven't edged on the far side. So if you have problems with it, you still have to plane that one down to its normal thickness. So like normally, we wouldn't be planing this down to whatever we left over. We'd want to make this board a certain thickness. So usually at this point, rather than planing this surface off, we'd put a marking gauge on here and mark a thickness and cut it with a saw, and then plane that off to get our board to the thickness we want. And so normally you're not doing the other side, and you usually are left with a 1/2 inch or whatever that's on there. So if you end up blowing off the other side, oh well, you're going to be cutting it off. So that's normally the case, but sometimes you want to protect it. What else we got?
Alex wants to know, what would be the technique to flatten longer boards?
It's the exact same thing. Exactly the same technique, just longer.
I wasn't done.
Oh, sorry.
There's a breath. Walking as you plane or doing it in parts?
Usually I will do it in parts. The problem with doing it in parts is you end up with a bowl here, and then you move over and you end up with a bowl here, and you end up with like these mounds that go between. So if you do it in parts, just make sure that every pass you do, you stagger it. So you're not doing this part, and this part every time. So you do, if you had three sections, you do 1, 2, 3, and the next one you would do 1.5, and then 3 in the previous half. So that you're always overlapping where you're stopping at. You don't always want to stop at the same point down the board. You're going to naturally create rotors. Yeah, usually I want my stroke to be about 4 feet, because that's where I can step on my back foot, and I can rock forward on my front foot and push off. And that's what I like to be a good stroke. And so if I'm staggering, I'm going to do like 3 feet and 3 feet and 3 feet, and then I'll do 4 foot, 4 foot, and a 2 foot. But sometimes I'll walk with it. It's very rare to be doing boards that big. If you're doing boards that big, you're usually doing like a tabletop. Mm-hmm. And in that case, you're doing sections because the board's 3 foot wide, and you're never going to be reaching across. You're going to go on the other side and do that area over there. And it's just kind of a game to play around it.
Right.
Cool. One more, or do we want to wrap up?
I don't have any more questions pulled out.
Cool. Well, this has been a fun one. So I want to say a huge thanks for coming out.
Thank you.
We will be doing more like this. If you would like to be in a one-on-one or in the Rockford area, let me know that. If you have a particular topic you would like to have covered, come on out, as long as it's small enough to fit into an hour.
Okay, can we just give a brief, like, what brought you here, Mark, and why you were interested?
Oh, I support James on Patreon, and the request came out for people to submit issues they were having trouble with. I've been building a workbench now for a while, and found that I kept on running into the same problem where I would flatten one side, so I thought, then turn it over, start flattening the other side, and then realizing the two sides were not parallel, and there's actually now a warp in there, and I don't know how I got that in there. So, it's a problem that I've run into multiple times. That's why I reached out asking for help on it. So,
yeah, and I'm always looking for other topics. So if anyone has something they want covered, it's just for something like this, you really got to cut it down. I wasn't sure if we're going to be able to do a whole flattening in one, but yeah, we got through it. So sometimes it's just like a small topic that actually will take up a full hour because I can talk.
No comments.
Cool. I think that'll do it. Anything I'm forgetting? So until next time, have a wonderful day. Bye. No, Melody, that's a new member.
Oh.